Hey everyone, Chris Hobart here, the Wealthologist. Now today, I want to talk about something that's confusing a lot of people. How in the world can GDP be up while inflation is down, especially with all the new tariffs and everything else going on? All right, it is time to bust a couple of myths today. Now, for months, the narrative has been tariffs are going to cause stagflation and that the new trade policy is going to crash growth and send inflation soaring. But what's interesting is what actually happened last week. You see, GDP was up and inflation is down. Here's the thing, I don't think a lot of folks were expecting this. The pundits definitely did not predict this. Now, according to the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now model, the second quarter growth is tracking at positive 3.8%. I gotta tell you, that's not just decent, it's strong, especially considering that Q1, the GDP dipped by 0.2%. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, Chris, back in Q1, didn't you say that that dip wasn't real weakness? You might remember we said that it was actually driven by a massive one time surge in imports as businesses rushed to bring in goods before tariffs kicked in. And that temporarily dragged down GDP because imports subtract from domestic output. So now that this front running's all over, well, imports are falling and GDP is starting to bounce back. Now, here's the kicker, and this is pretty interesting. While GDP is climbing, inflation's actually easing. You see, the Fed's preferred inflation measure, which is PCE prices, was up just 0.1% in April and only 2.1% over the past year. So, if you're thinking about this, that's practically at the Fed's 2% target rate for inflation. So, what's driving this? Well, let me break it down for you. First, and I know this isn't popular when we hear the media a lot of times, but tariffs in general do not cause broad inflation. Yes, they absolutely make specific goods more expensive. We can't argue that. And if they're very broad when it comes to those to the tariffs, that can have some impact. But the thing is, when we have tariffs, they tend to increase prices on some goods, but they reduce spending on other items. So if a tariff raises costs on imports, people have less money left for the rest of their shopping list, right? Which puts downward pressure on other prices. At the end of the day, monetary policy still matters more, which means inflation is ultimately about how much money is out there in the system chasing all the goods that are out there. And right now, the M2 money supply, the money in the system, it's been flat since 2022. Yes, during COVID, it increased by 40%, but it's been flat since 2022. Now, that means inflation is likely to stay low, unless, of course, the Fed changes course and prints more money. Fingers crossed that's not going to happen. So, the news cycle, they might be saying right now this is confusing, but the numbers are actually saying that this is a correction of the money supply. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, right? This doesn't mean that the economy is in the clear, and it definitely doesn't mean that the risk of recession is gone, and it definitely doesn't mean the inflation battle is over. If the Fed loosens too fast, we could be right back in inflation territory, no question about it. But for now, the picture's, well, it's just not as gloomy as the headlines may suggest. You see, the thing is, growth is rebounding, inflation is cooling, and that tariff panic, it may have been overblown. Yet we still have a ways to go in finding all of that out now, don't we? So what does this mean for us, right? For you and for me? A couple pieces of advice. I don't want you to get caught chasing news that's driven by political drama, and there is plenty of that right now. I want you to focus on fundamentals, and as always, stay diversified and informed, and keep your financial strategy tuned to real data, not clickbait. And before we go today, I'd love your perspective on what we talked about. Are you more worried about inflation returning, or are you more worried about a surprise recession ahead? Let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to hear your take and find out what you're thinking. Also, please like and subscribe and share this video with anyone that you think might want to hear a little bit more about this real story. As always, I'm Chris Hobart, the Wealthologist. We'll see you next week for another edition of the Wealthologist Weekly.